To many people, black paint is black paint. But for an artist, getting to know the differences between the different types of black paint is really valuable, because then you can make an informed choice of which color you want to add to your palette, if you want to add it to your palette, and what the differences are and what values or benefits you'll get out of that particular version of black paint. So today I'm looking at two different types of black paint, ivory black and bone black. So I'm using Golden Artist Colors Bone Black and Liquitex's Ivory Black. And both are really great quality, artist quality paints. The Bone Black, Golden uses PBK9, that's the pigment code, and that's a carbonized or essentially burned bones. It's considered a traditional pigment because people many years ago would burn the bones left over from their meals, and it would not have been the easiest pigment to work with. Just think of burning bones and then grinding them to develop a really tiny pigment size that would work as a paint. The pigment in Liquitex's Ivory Black is also PBK9, so same pigment in both. And historically, as you can imagine from the name, Ivory Black was created using ivory, but of course that is not acceptable and it's not legal today. It may still be made from horns, but can also be made from animal bones. And even though it has the same pigment number, often manufacturers will add a bit of additional carbon to make it a bit darker than bone black, and it can tend maybe a tiny bit brown compared to some of the other blacks. Now, before the ivory trade was outlawed, ivory black was considered a far better quality black than bone black, which was seen as inferior. Of course, both are made from animal bones or horns, so if you do not want to use animal products in your paintings, then you might be more interested in a carbon black or a Mars black. And I do have another video where I take a look at those two paints as well. So let's take a look at how they mix with other colors. So I used 2 yellows and 2 reds and 2 blues, as well as 3 secondary colors and titanium white in my mixing tests today. 2 of each of the colors that are the primary colors around the color wheel, so cool and warm and cool and warm and cool and warm, and then just 3 secondaries just for interest's sake, because a lot of people like using secondaries. So let's get taking a look at the actual color mixes. And here is the mixing sheet with all of the color mixes, and I'll just add the actual paints up here so that you can remember a little bit more easily as I go through it. So bone black, I start with the straight out of the tube right here. So of course it looks like a good solid black, and then I add some white so we can see how it looks as you lighten it. And throughout these different shades of gray, I would say, it's a nice neutral gray. I found while painting or doing these tests with bone black, it's nice to work with. It's not too overwhelming. It's not too weak. It's nice middle of the road black. And I find, of course, it's, just a nice seemingly neutral gray. I know some people say that bone black leans a touch warm, but I find almost seems a little bit blue, just a slight bit, but still quite neutral. So if you look at the 2 yellows, so Hansa Yellow Lemon and Cadfrey Yellow Medium, both make really interesting greens. Both are quite muddy greens, and what's interesting about blacks is you can use it to mix greens, because blacks just in general do have a lot of blue in it as compared to a brown. Now the 2 reds, so I have Cadfrey Red Medium and Quin Magenta, both make nice shades of either purple or more bricky colors. The blues, and this is where I find that bone black seems to lean a little bit more blue for me, is because it mixes up some really nice blues. Of course, everything on this side, there's a lot more black in it, so it's definitely much more neutralized and grayed out, especially once you add in the white. And this column is more of the mixing colors, so you're just slightly bringing down the intensity of the mixing colors. But you can make some nice, still especially fairly bright blues without them being too intense, using just a touch of bone black. And then once you get to the 3 secondary colors, so dioxazine purple, such a strong color, it can really, really overpower some other colors, but I didn't find it too bad with bone black. But you can definitely neutralize dioxazine purple because it can be incredibly intense straight out of the tube, or you can make just a nice, really neutralized, grayed out purple. Sap green, if you want a bit more of an intense green, then you can get mixing with the yellow. That can be nice to mix with the bone black. And then cad orange, again, just like neutralized cad oranges here. Now blacks, like I said a little bit earlier, they tend to have a bit more blue in them compared to the browns, whereas cad orange, this is where you can pull it back to be a bit more of a brown if you're interested in that. Now, if you look at ivory black, very similar to the bone black. Not a surprise. They are using the same pigments. I didn't necessarily find that it's a whole lot darker than the bone black. I'm not sure if Liquitex adds more carbon like some manufacturers do. Maybe it is a touch darker, but I didn't find it to be too dramatic. And I mean, I don't have exactly the same amount of whites mixed in here, but they're very similar. Okay, and then of course, looking at the 2 yellows, you can make really nice greens again. I'm not getting a huge variety of greens, but you can add using black mixed with yellow to your repertoire of mixing greens. So those could be really nice. The cad-free red and the quin magenta, again, quite purpley with the quin magenta, which is no surprise. There's a lot of blue in the quin magenta, and blacks, of course, lean a little bit bluer than like a brown. You can make nice bricky colors. Ultramarine blue and phthalo blue. I find it's not quite as intense of a blue color compared to the mix with the bone black. So while I can't necessarily tell just straight out of the tube or mixed with white if one of these leans a bit warmer, I suspect that ivory black does lean a bit warmer than the bone black because of how these blues are mixed. Now again, when I mix these, I'm not putting an exact amount or a similar amount in each. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. But I do think that the ivory black is just a little bit warmer, and because it might be just a touch warmer, you're not getting quite as blue of a mix here. And then the dioxazine purple, sap green, and cad orange, very similar to the mixes with the bone black. Now, I did one more test. I did some paintings, just some very small paintings. I found a photo of a black sand beach from above. And this one here is the bone black. And this one here is the ivory black. So it's a black sand beach, and it was a photo from above. And I just wanted to choose something where I had a lot of darks. So it was a really dark ocean, and I was able to just kind of add some of my own kind of color choices in this as well, so you can see a little bit of how it could mix. And to be honest, once you actually kind of get in and using them, I don't see a dramatic difference. Now, there is a little bit of a different color. I added a bit more green in here, really. Now that I'm done the painting, I can see that. Then this was a lot more blue. But really, as using it, they were both very similar experiences. So ultimately, I think either bone black or ivory black, whatever you can get, either will work very similarly. And if you compare it to, if you want to take a look at my carbon black and Mars black video, these are kind of in between those two for how intense the pigment is. So carbon black, incredibly intense. Like it can just overpower most of your mixes. Mars black was the absolute opposite, where it seemed very, very weak, whereas these are kind of in the middle. So if you want something a little more middle ground, maybe you do want to go with one of these.